Hello my lovelies, and welcome back to Allotment of the Dead. This particular video we'll have a look at some of the horrible nasties, pests and weeds and things like that that affect all of us gardeners and allotment holders pretty much probably every year, and we'll see if there's some ways we can get rid of things and that sort of thing. So I think we've already talked about flea beetle, but I'll give you another opportunity to see the damage that they can do. So you can see the leaves there. Now, I generally don't do much now for flea beetle. I did try spraying things in the past, but it's so much mixed differences in terms of what difference it makes. It becomes pretty pointless, really. So they don't look particularly great, but you can still eat them. And we'll go into the polytunnel. So the first horrible weed that people will always post to things like Facebook groups and say, can somebody name what this is? Can you tell me how to get rid of it? And pretty much the answer is napalm or move house or those sort of things. So this is the terrible mare's tail. I actually can't remember whether it's mare's tail or horse tail. I know one of them's aquatic and one of them is the land-based one, and they look quite similar, only the aquatic one's a little bit easier to control than this one. So mare's tail, let's call it mare's tail for now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's been around since the time of the dinosaurs, and it'll probably still be around long after we've gone. So you'll notice here grows these nice tall spears, and it's pretty much immune to most weed killers. And the thing you have to do with this weed, because it is a weed in most places, I mean, it looks really nice when you've got a nice large area covered in it. You probably couldn't plant anything in between it, but when you've got things covering it, got just this weed growing, it does look pretty spectacular. But to get rid of this one, you have to actually crush that outer surface of tissue that it's got there. So these are actually silicon based, so the actual outside of it is silicon coated. So to actually get any weed killer or anything like that in, you've got to pretty much tread on it, walk on it, and then most of the weed killers won't actually touch it anyway. Now, if you pull it out the ground like this, you'll see that weed on the root on the end. Now that root isn't all of it. These roots have been known to go down 6-7 meters, probably more, which again is one of the reasons why it survives pretty much anything you throw at it. So again, the roots on these are really fine, and they break very easily, which is why every time you get a broken root, it actually throws up 3 more plants, which again is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to get rid of. So I'll put it in with the rest of the weeds. Okay, bits of grass growing. So definition of a weed is basically a plant that is growing somewhere where you don't want it to be growing. So by that definition, this nice little plant here, which is a tomatillo from last year that's self-seeded, so that would be a weed. I've got 2 things I could potentially do with this. I could put it out as a weed, get rid of it, or I could let it grow, and if it's not somewhere where it's going to cause a lot of issues, then potentially a 3-4 foot plant might do really well and give you plenty of produce. Okay, we'll go on to the first nasty, horrible pest that I've had to deal with every year now for the last 6 years, and it's probably one of the reasons why I really hate ants. And again, Allotment of the Dead, ants is one of the only things that I will really try and get rid of and kill. I don't like killing things, honest, but ants really every single year take a lot of my plants. So you go to a lot of Facebook groups and somebody will post, I've got loads of ants, how do I get rid of them? And people go, oh, they're beneficial, don't get rid of them, they're fine. But you'll notice here I've got literally 3 plants in a row. All 3 have been destroyed by ants. And it's not because they're farming aphids on them, it's not because they're actually eating anything of the plant. It's because, you know, this fine soil you've got here, underneath that fine soil, all that little bits of soil that are on the top here have come from underneath the plants. So there's roots. The roots are actually got air pockets around them, so they can't take any nutrients in. So they go really soggy, floppy, and die. So I lost about 20 plants last year to ants, and this year I've about 6 or so. So it's not quite so bad. So you notice here I've actually not pulled the dead plants out at all. Reason being, I don't at this point want these ants to move. Now I could douse them full of water, I could do all sorts of things to actually dig them out and make them move, but I don't want to. The reason being, because all they'll do is move, and they'll probably move underneath one of the plants next door, and I'll end up losing that as well. So I'm not going to do that. These are actually red ants. Red ants are a little bit more difficult to get rid of than black ones. Black ones will take sugar, so they'll take sugar and borax, and they'll take the ant nest that you can buy in your local shops and things. But red ants, they're a little bit more carnivorous. They'll eat insects and things like that, and they'll take that back to the nest and eat those. They're not particularly that bothered about sugar. So again, a little bit more difficult to get rid of. What I have done in past years is dig them out and blowtorch them. I'm also one of those poor unfortunate individuals that can actually smell ants. It's a genetic trait that some people have. So some people have the ability to smell what ants smell like, and it's horrible. It's like formic acid. Ant bites are the main reason why they're so painful is because they actually secrete formic acid into the wound. So again, really horrible and really nasty bites. A lot of these other weeds are just generally annual weeds that you can just pull out and get rid of, and they don't root particularly very far down. You'll see here I've got a nice little mare's tail in there amongst the plants. Again, they're not like bindweed, and they won't wrap around plants and things like that, but they can in effect take most of the nutrients from plants if you've got lots of this mare's tail around them. The other weeds that we get generally on allotments are bindweed. So down there's a piece of bindweed, so I'll be taking that out shortly. Bindweed again is one of those plants that if you leave any bit of root in, it will come back. And we'll go into here, see if there's anything in here. I did do a little bit of weeding in here, so they get a little bit of annual weeds there. And yeah, you'll notice kind of nettles and things like that growing. So again, something you generally try and keep quite clear of weeds if you can, because they will take nutrients away from the plants that you've grown, and it will potentially decrease the yield. Okay, I'll show you potentially what bindweed can do to a plot. Not my plot though. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we've got some chickweed here and some more bindweed there. So it's one of those things, try and keep pulling it out where you can. The more you pull it out, the weaker hopefully the plant gets, and it will just die on you eventually. But let's show you how bindweed can take over a plot. So one of my neighbour's plots, the guy's been he's been away at university I think for a while, and I won't show his entire plot. I'll just point it in the direction and let you know as to what this particular weed looks like and the flower on it. It's got particularly nice flower on it actually, which is quite nice, but it will have the ability to take over an entire plot if you're not careful. So if you look here, all these lovely little white flowers is bindweed. Now some of this probably will only be a few plants, but what it does is it tends to build lots of tendrils, make lots of separate little tendrils coming off one main stem, and then it spreads across the surface to cover it. So if you can imagine, if you had plants actually grown in this that you were trying to actually grow for vegetables or to harvest, you'd have a hell of a job trying to make sure that that plant had enough sun and water and nutrients, because bindweed like this will actually take the nutrients away. And the other things that can be weeds are dock leaves. So we've got dock leaves and dandelions. So again, you want to try and get rid of those where you can. They're generally deep-rooted plants, and because they're deep-rooted, if you leave any of that root in, it'll grow back the following year. So I think we've got some dandelions there. So them clocks are really nice to blow and the kids love them. But if you've got dandelion clocks in your plot next door and you've got a nice bit of wind, then pretty much all of those seeds will go over all of your neighbours' plots and you're not going to make many friends. So let's have another look, see if there's anything else that we can show you now. So slugs and snails we've been quite lucky for here. Partly because we've got hedgehogs on the plot, and also, as I said before, we've got the foxes. So foxes will eat slugs, they'll eat snails, they'll eat rats and mice. So again, an allotment of this size, we've got quite a number of plots. We've got about 40 odd plots, and we get a large amount of things like rodents and stuff potentially around as well. So part of our job really is to try and make sure that these rats and mice are controlled as well. You'll notice on this nice plant here, hopefully, oh no, it's moving around. No, he's gone. There's a nice little ladybird on here. If you've got ladybirds, you've got ladybird larvae, and ladybird larvae are fantastic for getting rid of black fly, green fly, and all your aphids. So definitely something, if you see them, try not to get rid of them. They are friends to the gardener. So other pests that potentially you can get on an allotment, even though I feed the birds, birds again are quite good for getting rid of things like snails, your slugs, things like caterpillars and that sort of thing. But the other real horrible pest that potentially you get is pigeons. So you can see here, this is my perpetual kale. It's a perpetual kale because it doesn't run seed. It basically should survive almost anything you throw at it. But you can see here the pigeons have really gone to town on the new stems and the new leaves. Even though there's quite a bit of food around elsewhere, they just seem to like this. Okay, here's another annual weed that we get in the UK, fat hen. So fat hen is gets to about maybe up to a foot tall. Can be eaten. It's one of the weeds in the UK that you can eat. And you see there's a little bit bigger one there. I will pull these out at some point. In fact, I'll probably pull out the majority of this particular area because it looks like most of it's run to seed. I had like 3 rows of spinach here, and the hot weather we've had has really done a number on it. And I see the coriander here has gone to seed as well. really needs to be planted when it's a bit cooler. Okay, so you've just seen Fat Hen. So amongst all this beetroot, I've got some rows of beetroot. You see it's been disrupted a little bit here. These were supposed to be rows. So pest wise, cats, foxes, if you've got a raised bed with really soft earth in it, there's a good chance you'll be able to tell if it's a fox if you find eggs in there. They're very good at leaving you little presents of eggs. So people think somebody's playing practical jokes, but reality is the foxes have been and they've basically buried an egg for later. And you'll see here there's a nice row of another plant, and you're going to say, why are you growing a weed? So this is the same family as Fat Hen, but it is Huauzontle or Aztec broccoli that I'm actually growing here. So when I first grew this about 3 years back, I started planting it, and one of the guys that was on one of the other plots, he was passing and he saw me planting these, and as I was planting them, and they did actually look a little bit like Fat Hen. So the first question he asked is, why are you planting weeds? And I said, this isn't weeds, this is Aztec broccoli. And he was like, no idea what you're talking about. So he came back probably about a couple of months later, and by then these plants were actually 5 foot tall, and they had really nice spears of flowers on them, which is the part you eat. And you can eat the leaves like spinach, but the flower stems, a little bit like broccoli, when you eat those, is the part of this that you eat. And the good thing about it is it actually keeps the texture when you're stir frying them and things like that. So really, really tasty thing to be eating. And incidentally, it's supposed to be the national plant of Mexico. So in Mexico, they actually batter these, put a nice batter on them and deep fry them. It's supposed to be really tasty. Okay, I just saw this earlier, so I thought I'd show you this as well. Nice little black and yellow caterpillar there, and what's left of a ragwort plant. So ragwort is a native UK species. It's actually something that horses and cattle to an extent are actually find very, very toxic. So they can actually really damage the intestines of horses. So there's actually, if you let these particular plants get out of control, then you can actually be fined. But the odd ragwort on your plot is okay. Again, they always say try and wear gloves when you're handling them, but they say that of most plants that you grow. And this lovely little caterpillar here will turn into the cinnabar moth, which is it's a red and black moth that I think probably most of you guys will have seen at some point. The thing about these caterpillars is they do only eat ragwort, so potentially with ragwort dying off, then these won't do very well. So my allotment zombies, thank you very much for watching this video. We'll make some more over the next few weeks. Hopefully you can get lots of good information from this, and hopefully you'll be able to give me some decent tips about how to get rid of some of these horrible beasts and nasties that I've been dealing with over the years. So till next time, thank you, all the best, bye bye.